Amanda, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness.
Hi, Sheree. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm super honored, grateful to be here.
Yeah, I think we're going to have an awesome discussion around this whole intergenerational trauma and, healing our ancestral stuff. But I want to start with your story because you had quite a career shift. And it's so funny. On this podcast, I've interviewed so many women and men who started out, their career trajectory was going a certain way. They had some level of awakening around this is not what I'm born to do, even though they maybe had some level of enjoyment with what they were doing or felt some kind of fulfillment with it. But as you know, a soul calling is different than a career path. So you started out in law enforcement.
I was a probation officer for about 6 years. I did the thing where you go to college and you pick a career. And I honestly, I didn't even know what a probation officer was. I had a degree in psychology and a degree in criminal justice. And even then, I wasn't going to school with the intention of being a probation officer, but it just kind of worked out that way. And so I ended up, doing that for 6 years. And when I first started, I was like, I absolutely love this. I'll never leave. And little did I know what, my higher self and the universe, God had in store for me, because that didn't last as long as I thought it would.
Well, that's pretty hardcore. I mean, I'm sure you saw, did it kind of harden you a little bit in terms of feelings of safety, or did it give you kind of the only reason I asked this is my dad has had his whole career in law enforcement. And so I kind of grew up with, he had a healthy dose of skepticism with literally everything that we did as a family, just because he saw that other side of life. Was that kind of happening for you?
It did. So what I kind of reflecting back and unpacking some of those things, I was all out in my masculine. It was how I stayed safe for so many years. Like I wasn't ever in, especially, I mean, there were probably little bouts of times where I was in my feminine, but I was definitely I was in that masculine. It was kind of a distorted masculine because it was like an overcompensation for the things that were still inside of me that, it just didn't feel safe to be able to be feminine and to be fully myself. And so, so it definitely did. I caught myself toward the end there getting a little cynical, because you deal with the 1% of the 1% that just really has a lot of trauma, and they just don't really they function at a different frequency. I'll say that. And it's just, it can be very, very draining. So it was probably about 3 years in that I had this awakening in consciousness, and I started to really question everything. And just because even when I was a little girl, I had this innate knowing that the things that we were told, like there was something missing. I was like, I'm not being told everything here. Like the whole, like almost like cookie cutter way we do things, and this, perpetual cycle. I was like, there's something missing. And I thought it was like outside of myself. Later, I realized that wasn't the case, but it was just kind of started with this external search for, the answers, the books that I read, the courses that I did, just really like, okay, I just know that I'm not meant to feel this discord and this pain and this sense of like, it's like a lack of fulfillment. Like it just kind of felt like there was something that was just empty inside of me that I didn't know where to, like, I tried to source it from all these external things. And I realized that, it was part of my journey to go through these experiences,
and that's
kind of coming back home.
That's usually the first marker on the path of spiritual awakening, is that there's a definite sense of something missing.
Yeah.
Like working so hard at even chasing spirituality, you could say, or going on a religious path, or something where, like you said, there are markers there that you were told, if you do these things, you'll feel this way. And you do the things and you're not feeling the way they promise, right?
Yeah.
And so it's empty. There's an emptiness there. There's this remote sense of like, what am I doing wrong? Which then leads to, I think the next piece of it is, maybe I'm not. Very few people, well, I shouldn't say that. That sounds very exclusionary. But a lot of times we personalize and say there's something wrong with us. It can't be the system. It can't be the program. It can't be the authorities that we're obeying. It's us. When someone starts to awaken, they come to the realization that it's probably not them. there's something wrong with the exterior models.
Absolutely. And I always say, like, you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. It's simply like an unraveling of all of the distortions, the imprints, the lies, all the things that you subscribe to that were maybe a path of least resistance at the time that actually aren't true. They never were. They're not you. And once you are able to shine the light on these things and bring more of your innate essence back online, it really, really allows you to step into this expansiveness of that allness that you are. And I know that, like, sometimes when we say these things that, like, people are like, you know, because I feel like once you, like, you can know, there's like, you can know something, but then when you like know it, when you feel it, it's like
In
a
your
different
bones. Yeah.
experience, right? So it's just, again, like the way that it's been kind of shown to me and the way I've experienced it is like outsourcing our own, you know, source connection to people, places, things that we're told to subscribe to. And it's just a way that we really disconnect from ourselves and give our power away and just kind of allow all that external like guidance in a way that is very detrimental to us being able to be connected to our own source connection and live from that place of alignment and truth. And what is my highest 10 out of 10? Because so many people, like, their yes is really a no. And then that creates this like discord. And then they're moving about life like with like the, oh, I should do this, I should do that, versus like, what is actually my highest? What feels expansive? And then when we're living in that way, it's like, if everything is frequency, then like we're kind of like sending these mixed messages. Like we may want something, but we're not actually like an embodiment of that because of all the things that we told ourselves, like it's not the case, or we're unworthy, or, you know, we are broken. Like it's just really like unraveling those things in the present moment, because we don't have to go on like this fishing expedition to unearth all of these things. We can just allow what's showing up and really just be present for what is showing up. And that's a way that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think what I'm hearing you say is that we emit a signal through our frequency, and whatever matches that frequency in the field comes back to us. And sometimes it's not what we actually want because we're not congruent with what we think we're sending out, what we think we want. But we're actually, when we're trying to placate and people please and all of these things, we send a signal that's not congruent with what we actually want. And then we wonder why we're not receiving our heart's true desires. But it has to be an energetic match. It has to be a match. Your frequencies, you probably heard this before, but like, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And that comes back to, again, having that authenticity, that making sure that the signal you're sending out is what you actually want, not what you're told you need to want or what everyone else wants. And that path of authenticity is so crucial to stepping onto your path. So I want to come back to the law enforcement switch. So you're on this career path of being a probation officer, which is super intense.
Yes.
At what point, after 6 years, at what point were you like, maybe I'm a healer? How did that manifest for you?
Oh man, I know when people are like, wait, you did what? Now you do what? I'm like, yeah. So it was about 2 years before I left, because I really started doing my own inner work, because I truly believe, because to me, healing is, and I loved the word that one of my friends had put, it's like almost like I'm more of a healing facilitator, because it's not necessarily like, I'm not like going in and manipulating other people's fields or anything. I'm holding space so they can heal through their own source connection, because that is empowering, helping people activate their own inner healer, their own inner power. Like that is the vibe for me.
Right.
So it was a couple years before I left. I definitely hid in the spiritual closet for quite some time, because it was one of those things where I'm like, first of all, when I'm in that field, I'm like, people already think I'm definitely different and off. And that was part of like me learning to be able to, something I really struggled with is being authentic, and the fear of being judged, and the fear of being ridiculed, and the fear of like getting in trouble and all these things, which is, you know, all the programming things that I had used to keep myself safe as a little girl. And so I was doing like the inner work and really in my process kind of at an individual level. And then I just like started to really understand that I was meant to do something so much bigger than to just like wake up and go to a job that was like a 6 out of 10 for me. Like that it wasn't my highest, like it didn't feel expansive anymore. I had kind of learned all that I was meant to learn there. And it really just was time for me to move forward. And it's because I feel like what's going on the planet, part of what's going on is some of us kind of feel like we're like very vulnerable in this wide open space. Like we're standing on stage naked because it's like, we're actually creating the new paradigms. And so if it's, maybe it had been done anciently, but right now in the now, it's like kind of like, oh, well, this feels really uncomfortable because we're actually writing a script.
We're pioneering something new. There's a reformation. Yeah.
Yes.
We're on the cusp of something that hasn't been done before. We have to create it with a different frequency than it was created in the past. And it's very vulnerable. Like you said, it's
so vulnerable.
It's like, I wish I could read a manual on this. Is there something?
Yeah. And it's like, you're getting the message at the same time. Well, you're the one writing the manual.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
and it's such a beautiful, humbling experience because then I've learned for me, there's this energy of not only receiving, but listening. Like I've even learned to like I meditate. I've been meditating for an hour a day, but I'm also looking at it as I'm listening for an hour a day because I can be the receiver of something so much greater than me, like coming from this divine source connection to where if I'm in do, because we're conditioned to be in the busy do, you're not productive. You're not cutting it. You're not doing the things, like you're not showing up and working a solid, 8 to 10 hour day. Then you didn't put in an honest day's work, all these things that we're told and subscribe to that keep us in burnout and that keep us in do depletion mode rather than working with the frequency of our higher self and our source connection to allow this more expansive thing to come through. Because when we take a moment and pause and listen, maybe that information that's coming through when we learn to listen is something that like keeps us from having to do 10 steps. We can just like do the one thing that is just like so expansive. And it's just a whole different frequency, a whole different energy than being in this depletion. And that's something that I experienced in the last year, really has been humbling for me starting a business. It's been about a year now and learned through a lot of like trial and pivoting and really just learning that, again, I'm not meant to do business in this old way, with the scarcity tactics and the fear-based marketing and that sense of urgency that's created. It's like, no, like to me, it's like an invitation for someone who is at that resonance and is able and open to receive. And it's such a different frequency that we're cultivating, and it's different.
Right. Yeah. So the unhealthy masculine paradigms are not serving us anymore. The patriarchy is what got us kind of, I'm not talking about men, I'm talking about the patriarchy, the ideologies perpetuated from the patriarchy. It's a whole different kind of energy than what you're talking about, is more attraction-based, magnetizing to you, nourishment models, meditation, stillness, receiving, still point creation, all of that. What I would really love for us to now pivot into is, how does intergenerational trauma work into kind of what's happening on the planet right now? What you're seeing with your clients? I mean, I definitely, I've been studying this for probably 20 years now, just epigenetics and how, the environment that we're in is what triggers the cellular, activates or triggers the cell to express its genetic coding. And so you can have, the blueprint, let's just say, but you don't have to build the house. I think more people are awakening to this, that there's empowerment behind, just because this is in your genetic inheritance does not mean that it needs to be your destiny. Yeah. It's just there. So what have you learned about that? I know that you work around, helping people get in touch with what that trauma might be. What have you seen in terms of best practices for people to become aware of what's running them, in terms of that maybe genetic inheritance, and how they can shift out of being a victim to that maybe and finding a different pathway to have a new gene sequence unfold, if you will?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many different like ways that I can go. I love this conversation and this topic, because I think that the first thing that I feel guided to say is that the underpinnings of like what you're feeling it's like, I think of them as like kind of energetic software programs. So it's like the underpinnings of what's coming up is kind of your compass. So if there's like, it's like, it can, again, it can be subtle, but like if something is feeling off in your body and your energy field, like that's an indication of something that isn't in alignment. And there's a difference sometimes too, because it's like, well, one, is it just like something that you really want to do that's in your highest, but if there's a little fear involved, that's different. I'm talking more about like those things that are, the poverty mindsets, the scarcity, that I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable stuff. And
Right.
so this,
Which is so deeply embedded in the whole collective.
it really
And
is.
it's not just one family line, if you will, of generational trauma. This is those three things you just said, not feeling worthy, not feeling lovable, and having a poverty consciousness, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's embedded in the whole collective. But in some family lines, it can be more pronounced just because of what they've walked through experientially. And that can be passed several generations down, right? You could skip generations and have it show up in one of your kids from a great great ancestor.
Absolutely. And I like to use the example because I think it's like easy for people to understand. Like, let's say you had like a grandparent that was in like the depression, like that whole era. And it was like such a profound cellular experience. And it was such like encoded in like everything, the cellular memory, like maybe they had no money, or maybe they were like, barely getting by on food and all these things. And now that's encoded in their energy field. So now it's in the DNA, right? It's in the genes.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're reproducing, again, it can, we never fully know like how it's going to express itself, but if it's still like encoded in the cellular memory and it gets passed down, because I know that I've actually experienced this. That's why I kind of like this illustration, because there has been like this the underpinnings of like, wow, this feels interesting. Like, I don't even know where this came from, because it's like one of the first questions I like to ask is this mine? And did I even create it? Because I've noticed with my clients and in my own experience, like if it wasn't something that I intentionally created as like almost like that safety mechanism, or like, the things we experience in childhood, if it's like traumatic and it's like our way of staying safe, maybe it's like, I'm not worthy because this has been so painful. And, then we inadvertently block certain relationships. But if it's something that I didn't create, it was something that was passed down, I've actually found it to be much easier to let go of, because that my identity structure isn't so attached to it. It's not so tied to it. And so I don't like to look at generational trauma, like, because I've heard people say, I am here to do the work for the ancestors, and like almost like I'm putting this heavy load on my back, and blah,
The
blah, blah.
that's like the Martyr Syndrome, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that's not a high vibrational frequency. And again, like no judgment, but this is how I've learned to reframe it. I'm doing this, inner acknowledgement, this shift, this releasing of stuff, and I'll offer it to my ancestors. And then just by me doing it, I'm breaking that cycle so that I'm not going to pass it down to future generations, because it's not in my energy field anymore. And so that's the intention that I do the work from, because if I'm doing it, like you said, kind of like that martyr syndrome, and like that, I have to fix
this is so
this
hard. I have to suffer. Yeah. Or you
then that's going to
feel,
come through. It's going to come through, and I'm not going to be able to show up in a place of that high vibration, because I'm putting these almost like things on myself that aren't even like, I don't have to do
it's
that.
not
Like,
even yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're not, this is good, because I started my path with that mentality, decades ago, where it's like, I guess it's up to me.
Me too.
And
And
I have amazing ancestors. I know I do. I'm not saying there was a whole bunch of like darkness, that whatever. There's a lot of light gifts, and there's a lot of things they handed down that way. But I had to shift out of this like burden of responsibility. I've been given so much in this life. I have all this privilege or whatever. And I'm able to do things my ancestresses were not able to do, just because of the consciousness and different things. At the same time, I'm not responsible for their up level.
yeah.
Like you said, it's an offering and it's invitational, and they get to choose how they receive that. And it's so interesting. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when I work with people one-on-one, or when I'm doing retreats or anything like that, I might have like, let's just say 50 people in the room, but I know that room is loaded with ancestors and people that have a vested interest in that person's progression and evolution, because it is definitely breaking some kind, I don't want to say generational curse because that's a weird term, but you know what I mean?
I know exactly.
That,
Yeah, I know exactly what
like
you're referring
it's
to. Yeah.
freeing, it's freeing the energy frequency of that darkness that got attached to that family, that issue or whatever it is. Um, Also knowing that it doesn't rise or fall with us. We're not so superhuman that we're still trying to deal with our own crap.
Mhm.
And there's a lot happening on the planet in our environment. But for me, how I had to come to terms with this just to feel okay, because there's a lot of stuff in my family lines, multi-generational, like suicide, depression, that kind of thing, was to raise my own frequency, have that be my highest life goal. Let's just say living heart-centered and opening my heart field and having heart coherence. That way there's love there.
Yeah.
And I have to feel it for myself first in my own sacred soul. And that is how you teach your ancestors, if you will, how they can do that for themselves. We cannot supersede someone else's free will and agency and give that to them. That is a process of their own awakening, whether they're on this side of the veil or the other.
I absolutely love that. And I feel like when we do step into our own just innate soul frequency, our own innate soul essence, it is an invitation. And when you were speaking, like I was like writing down cellular codes, because I think that that is a way that when we're carrying those like cellular codes of this embodiment, it can be an activation just from that presence. Like just from even, on this podcast or walking into a room, it's an invitation because it's again a remembrance for them to be like, oh, I remember this light. Like, I know this is somewhere inside of me. And granted, like, it's this other person's unique frequency, but it's this embodiment of the all that isness of them. And it's this invitation for you to be like, whoa, okay, I remember this. And that's an activation. That's a rewiring. That's a cellular shift. So sometimes we make these things so difficult and we're like, I got to get all the books and I got to go to all the things. Like,
And I got to
granted,
learn
those
it
are
logically
supportive.
and intellectually. And I got to,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
so intuitive, isn't it? Like,
It is.
okay, I want you to explain a little bit more about you teach this thing, inspired action, flow. You talk about rapid recodes. It kind of reminds me of what you're talking about, the coding and the
Mhm.
activations in the genes, the cellular coding. Do you want to go into a little bit more detail about rapid recodes?
Yeah, so that's even shifted for me a little bit. I actually am now calling them essence activations because
Ooh,
like I mentioned before, I just am so passionate about holding sacred space because to me there's a difference between holding sacred space and trying to like, you know, and again, it's been an evolution, right? Everything has been perfect. Like I've learned so many things, that have led me to this moment. And one of the things that I love to ask, and even just like when I'm working with people, it's like, it even just proclaiming, I choose to see the truth, right? I set the full intention. I'm willing to see the truth. I choose to see the truth. And so when we're in this space of like more so cultivating and activating like our innate essence, we can identify these different pieces. It could be so many different things that we love as humans, we love to label. So emotions, beliefs,
mm-hmm,
identity structures, different
mm-hmm.
ancestral programming, chords, whatever you want to call it, entity, whatever we want to call
Entity
it, right?
attachments, all that stuff, courting.
All the
Yeah,
things. But
it's
when we're,
endless. And
yeah.
that can put people in a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah. And so what I found and this is just in my humble opinion, what works for me is I just set the intention, like I strengthen my field, connecting to my higher self and the heart of source, because to me, that's the purest channel. And instead of, and again, not knocking anybody who connects with like, elementals or angels or any
Yeah.
of that.
Everybody has their way of
Yeah,
connecting to
what
divine. Yeah.
totally fine. But for me, it's like I've just found that to be the purest way. And then any type of healing work I do, because again, if it's so much bigger than me, like I don't prep for sessions, I don't do any of that because it's coming through me. Like
Yeah.
God's source is using me as a vessel for things that it's like I may not even, and that's why it's like, sometimes we get those intuitive hits and we're like, that sounds really weird. And then you say it and the person's like, oh my gosh, because it's so much more expansive than coming from that mental construct or from the mind. And then any healing work I do, it is offered because, tuning into the field, like I feel things very deeply in my body. So I'm able to pick up on things, that's going on in the person's body. And offer suggestions to their higher self or wherever they're at, because I feel it's about meeting people where they're at. Because another little pitfall we can get into is when we're trying to force the healing work. Like,
Yeah.
I always take it back to the inner child. And if the inner child is like sad and crying, like, are we going to be like, you must just let go of it now, and we're going to just release this and recode it? And to me, like, a lot of the rewiring work is about bringing an awareness and shining that light. And it's about like giving instructions and even offering an invitation for, because again, once we know something and have it in the awareness, then it's like, we can't, it's there, it's out on the main stage, we can't unknow it. So when these things get uncovered, it's just so simple as asking. Like, it's so simple. Like, we don't need to do all these like other crazy things. Like, it's really just like that, for me, that pure connection to source, and just like tuning into what wants to show up. And it always, it's about like creating that sacred space and really just like holding space for whatever is ready to show up. And it never looks the same. I'm always like, wow, like the things that come up. And so to me, like the recodes and everything is just almost like that, just asking for the help from God, source, universe, giving instructions. And, one thing that, because I don't look at time as linear. To me, everything is happening in the now. If it's showing up in the now, like, we don't have to go, pull the Akashic. And it's just another way of getting to that place, I feel. But if we can bring like a past event, and we can actually bring it into the present, and we can do rewiring work from the space of, like, let's say it's a childhood trauma, like allowing that to be in the present, and like holding space for the way that that child needed the space held at that time, that maybe the adults that were in their unconscious were not able to do with the tools that they had. And so to me, that is like changing the history of the now. And it's kind of sounds complicated, but it really is. So it once you kind of understand like how this works, for those of you listening, like, it really is just about what's showing up for me in the present, and working at it from, and not even working at it, but being able to like have that just be in presence. Like, that is what allows us to shift these things, because it's another like kind of way that, we're going into the future, going into the past is another way that we sidestep what wants to be felt and seen. And that's where we continue to hold these like constricted emotions in the body and things, when we're just kind of like, well, it's too scary to go there. Like, I get it. Like, the emotions can be very painful.
So you're just saying kind of holding space and sitting with what arises, healing timelines. Like you said, everything's before us, like a scroll, the past, present, and future. It's all here right now. It's the point of power. So what is I know you said you meditate an hour a day. Now that can be sort of ominous for a lot of people. And I feel like the only way, literally the only way we can survive these times and come out with some semblance of divine order and peace and all the frequencies we seek to embody is through meditation. Can you just give us a really short, maybe practical tip for how you come into that space of receiving with meditation and connect to the pure heart of source that you referenced?
Yeah. And I'll say, like, for those of you maybe starting on a meditation journey, it can be something like, you don't have to set a time or anything like that. And it's something where at the beginning, like, and I even have this come up sometimes too, where the voices start to come up, and I've just learned to be the observer. Yeah. Just learn to be the observer instead of letting those voices run the show. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, I hear you. I see you. I love you. Okay, cool. But what gets me really in the space for meditation is getting into that heart breath, really like getting into my body, and then setting the intention to just ground myself, whether I'm visualizing myself ground into the planet, because we are here. So sometimes I think another way we try to escape is to go into the ethers and to ascend. It's like, well, we have these meat suits.
No, it's lower chakras.
Yeah.
And I think this is where people bypass their true power. You are, like you said, you have a body.
Yeah.
A lot of times women, because of trauma, and men too, but especially women, I think we disconnect from the lower chakras, which is that grounding cord to the earth. So I love that. One of the ways that I start meditation, and I learned this from a really powerful spiritual teacher, is I picture my body as a tree trunk, and that tree trunk, and not just the roots, but the whole trunk is going down all the layers of the earth to the crystal core and wrapping around it.
Love that.
And then all of that beautiful energy from Mother Earth is coming up through those roots up into the trunk. And that I am the tree, right? And connecting to Mother Source, if you will, the Mother Source. how do you connect to Mother Earth? How do you ground into that? And I just wanted to say that because you're right. People think it's about fifth and sixth and seventh chakra areas, right? Like throat and above. But the heart is the bridge between the lower and the upper chakras. And we cannot tap into our heart field and frequency without grounding into the lower chakras and Mother Earth because we haven't felt safe.
Yeah.
The lower chakras are all about safety. And you mentioned your masculine, you were in your masculine to protect yourself and because you didn't feel safe. And that's what we've all done. We've all done that. We've all disconnected from our lower centers because number one, we're told they're bad. They're not reliable. And also we've had to create protections and that's created, some disconnect there. So what's your favorite way, maybe visually to kind of just get there? Like, oop, here I am.
Love that we're talking about this because I think it's so important. It's game changing. So one of the things that I want to mention too is because Mother Earth is the most like nourishing, loving, unconditionally loving. Like she wants to take your pain and you don't need to know how. This is again, the mind is going to be like, well, what do we have to do to like nothing? You have to ask. That's it. And so one thing that I love to do is wherever I'm feeling, because nature is obviously amazing, but if it's not accessible in the moment, you can really set the intention to place yourself wherever it is you feel guided. Maybe it's like, meditating on a beach, or maybe it's like feet planted into the soil and really connecting with the frequencies of the earth. And for me, I'll just set the intention to grow those roots out of my feet and to really just extend my energy down past all the levels and layers of the planet with the intention to connect to that like fifth dimensional heart chakra of Mother Earth, which I just envision this is like beautiful golden, like elixir love light. And then just asking her to send that up into my body. And because again, it's like, if you have a lot of trauma and there is a lot of pain and you don't feel safe to be in your body, then the nervous system is going to be in that like fight, flight, or freeze response. And so love, the frequency of love and compassion, those frequencies are really helpful to calm the nervous system and to allow you to arrive in the body. And again, all you have to do is ask, like, because some people, it's like learning to use your own intuition muscle. Like, do you feel deeply? Do you see? Like, it doesn't matter. It just really is about intention and asking, and then having that clear channel to connect and being willing to receive it. And if you don't feel safe in your body, like Mother Earth, like just intention to bring this beautiful, like nourishing mother energy up those chakra channels. And just, even if it's just a little bit for whatever you're ready for, whatever your body is ready for, to allow you to feel safe in your body, even if it's just a little bit. And then, so I'll have that like connecting up, and then I'll set the intention and connect with my higher self, expanding it up even further, connecting with the heart of source. So I'm connected above and below.
I love that you brought that up because that is the bridge piece that like once you establish that safety, which comes first, right? Through those lower centers and then opening up the heart, then now you're ready to connect to those upper centers. And that you could say the central sun or the great cosmic, source, God. I think though, and I know you agree with me on this because we did talk about this earlier, that it's in you. I think there just comes this whole thing where it's like, I got to connect here and there and everything's outside of you. And interestingly, yes, I mean, we're not alone. We're all, you called it the oneness. What did you call it? You had a fun name for it. The allness.
Everything, the isness, the oneness, the unity, consciousness, all the things.
When you get to the heart of it, you realize it's not outside of you. And that frequency, holding that frequency, the acceptance that it lives in you, that even though we have to do this visualization because we have these human bodies and there's so much mystery around everything, even though we are attaching to the cosmos and the earth, also knowing that all of those codes, all of that wisdom, all of that light is already here. We just came to uncover it and learn it and consciously connect to it, but it's inside of us. It does not happen outside of us, right?
Absolutely. It's almost like a strengthening of it and an openingness and an intention setting to really strengthen it and to allow like whatever wants to come through and really just like that expansiveness. Because going back to like the fact that you aren't separate from it, that is just like an ancient, distorted template that keeps you outsourcing and searching outside yourself. And it's been
Powerless.
infiltrated. Yeah. It's been infiltrated into so many like texts and, we could go down
Right.
rabbit
Oh
holes
yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
and we don't need to go there, but it's been present to where it's just kind of like, well, I don't fully feel it. Well, you are it. And it's like a remembrance of that you are it. And then even just being open to accepting more of it. Like for me, and I think in the past, I did do like shielding my field, but that doesn't even resonate anymore, because for me, it's like, I choose to connect to that source and strengthen my field. And I think that it all depends on where you're at, because if or maybe at the beginning of this journey that, shielding might be beneficial, because I think that when we have a lot of, these energies that are still in our field and maybe different attachments and things like, sometimes it might kind of be navigating what feels good. But I'm just learning that because if everything goes back to intention, if I'm like, oh, I got to protect myself, it's like, again, goes back to, well, I'm not safe. There's like a fear energy attached to it. So we really can just source everything we need from source.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, coming back to still point creation, like you said, holding that sacred space, allowing it to be sourced within you so you feel it, so you don't feel separate from it. And when you hold that frequency, your life moves into order. You naturally embody these, let's just say the healing frequency, the power frequency, the love frequency. When you stand in the center of the allness, the totality, there's so many words for it, but
All
when
the
you,
things.
yeah, when you recognize that source is literally in you, then there's a natural ordering that takes place with frequencies and patterns and the healing of the intergenerational trauma. Like you said, you don't have to sit there and focus on, okay, what's happening right now? What do I need to do? Do I need to breathe this certain way? Do I need to move this certain way? You might, but it really is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, in your experience, it's a receiving model. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And when we overthink it, that's when it dilutes the power of what it's actually doing in us. And we just need to get out of the way and let it happen.
Absolutely. The receiving, and that's something I've really been practicing, because receiving is a lot more of a feminine energy, and being in that masculine my whole life, it was like action, 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 force, 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 control, control, control. And so it is very vulnerable sometimes. Like it's a vulnerable practice to receive, because it's like an acceptance of something. And so when we can almost like clear to our the way that it's been shown to me is just clearing like what's clogging up my ability to receive. Again, is it something that I'm saying yes to? Is it like a relationship? Is it, a different a career? Is it something that is like clogging up the energetic space to where I'm not able to allow in what is truly my highest, because I'm choosing something that is a 4 out of 10 and that doesn't feel good because I think I should. I told myself I have to. Like those are all just simply, they just simply aren't true.
Yes. And we siphon our energy and our power when we're trying to make it okay for everybody else. And that's a huge thing. I think that's one of the paradigms that are shifting right now.
Yeah.
Well, I know we went a lot of different directions. I love this. So where can people find you online, Amanda?
The two places that are probably that I hang out most are Instagram and then just my website. I would say those are the two best spots.
I'm going to spell your name for people.
Okay.
It's Amanda, Monnier. I'll also have a link in the show notes. That's you on Instagram at Amanda Monnier.
Monnier. Yep. Perfect.
Monnier. And then your website is amandamoniercoaching@gmail.com. Or no, sorry, that's your email.
Yeah.
amandamonnier.com is your website. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well,
and I have a couple
so
little like freebies too on there, little meditations and stuff if people want to take a look at those. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, yes. Thank you so much for your time. I feel like we were just like,
I know, right? I could go on for probably another hour. Chat about what's going on the planet, right?
Yeah. When you're talking about consciousness, there's a stream that happens and you just feel like you can go on and on and on. But I do appreciate your time today. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. Thank you. It's been amazing connecting.